Good afternoon and welcome into another edition of Dodgers Dogs as part of the Dodgers Daily Network. My name is Austin Brubaker. I will be your host today on another Monday afternoon. The Monday afternoon shows seem to be the shows that work out best for me right after work, heading in here and excited to talk some Dodgers baseball with you guys. It's an exciting day. Personally, I was able to go ahead. There's single game tickets that went on sale for the Lansing Lugnuts, so April 8th through the 11th, I will be there watching the High A affiliate of the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Great Lakes Loons, in action. I'm excited about that, but that is not the big news of the day. Today is February 10th, 2025, and pitchers and catchers have reported. It is an exciting day if you are a baseball fan, because now is when baseball season is really starting to get into action. Pitchers and catchers are starting to report. Dodgers being one of, if not the first team to report to their respective spring training. All of the other players are going to be reporting in the next couple of days. It is an exciting time to be a baseball fan, but particularly to be a Los Angeles Dodgers fan. Baseball is coming back. We are just 10 days away from the first spring training games. First spring training game is going to happen on February 20th. Los Angeles Dodgers against the Chicago Cubs in Camelback Ranch. It's going to be an exciting action, and it's going to be an incredibly important spring training for the Dodgers to try to figure out how they want to mold this roster for what is anticipating to be another very highly successful season for this team. The expectations for the Los Angeles Dodgers are through the roof. This team is going out there and doing everything possible to build the best roster that they believe they can build specifically for the 2025 season, because they feel it is their duty to pay it back to the fans. And in doing so, they have made a number of moves to improve this roster. And I'm excited to be able to talk to you guys a little bit about the newest addition to the Los Angeles Dodgers, or re-addition to the Dodgers. Kik Hernández is back in Los Angeles. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what this means. And then also, as a result of this signing, I will make the case for a particular player to potentially be traded. We'll dive into that, where that makes sense, where that might not make a whole lot of sense, and ultimately what I think the Dodgers are going to do. It's going to be a fun, exciting show for you guys, but today is also going to be a show where there's going to be a lot of interactions with you guys in the comment section. I'm incredibly grateful for each one of you guys and your support continued here for Dodgers Daily. Thank you guys so much for that, and I'm excited to be able to join in by you guys. Orlando baseball is back, absolutely. Craig Osterberg, how back to you. Elishiva Jones is joining us. Justin Llamas is joining us from France. It's an exciting day to be a Los Angeles Dodgers fan. Let's dive first into Kik Hernández, because this was a move that I think most of the Dodgers fans were expecting. They were expecting to bring back a Kik Hernández. We had heard at Dodgers Fest from Andrew Friedman that the door really was never closed for a Kik Hernández to bring him back. Yet, with the limitations on this 40-man roster, which Casey and I have talked about extensively through the course of the offseason, there just isn't a lot of guys, or really any guys, that the organization wants to get rid of or can easily designate it for assignment on this roster. Even dating back to Ryan Brazier. That was not a decision that the organization really wanted to make, but it was a decision that they had to make because they felt like Kirby Yates was an upgrade to Ryan Brazier, and that is the move that made the most sense for the state of the roster where it was at. Now, pitchers and catchers have reported, which means this, and this is a date that we've talked about pretty much all offseason. On this specific date, it allows you to move some of the pitchers that you know are going to be injured to the 60-day injured list. Pitchers like a Gavin Stone, pitchers like a Brusdar Graterol, or potentially an Emmett Sheehan, or a lot of these guys that we know, River Ryan, guys that we know are going to be injured. They have the ability to move them off of the 40-man roster onto the 60-day roster and open up additional spots to add in some additional players. And for a player like a Kik Hernández, who I think if he was going to come back, likely was going to come back under the scenario because obviously I think Kike Hernández loves being a Los Angeles Dodger, and I think he uniquely fits this Dodgers team, particularly because of his success in October. The reason why the Dodgers brought back Kike Hernández has nothing really to do with his ability to play a lot of different positions. Yes, he does have ability to play a lot of different positions, and that is helpful through the course of the regular season. The Dodgers also have a lot of players who have the ability to do that. They have Chris Taylor on this roster who has the ability to play a lot of different positions and move around. They have other guys with a lot of versatility. One of the reasons why they brought in a Tommy Edman is because of his positional versatility. That's not necessarily the reason, nor is it the reason because of his success that he had during the course of the regular season last year why they brought back Kike Hernández, because honestly, he did not have a ultra successful regular season. First half was not good. Obviously, there's a difference, and you have to acknowledge the difference between Kike Hernández pre-glasses and Kike Hernández post-glasses, which I believe happened. He started wearing glasses the last game of the series in Philadelphia on July 11th. If you look at those numbers, he hit a 109 WRC plus from July 11th through the end of the season, significantly better than the overall regular season 83 WRC plus. Significantly better hitter, but that's just a couple of points above league average. What is the real reason why the Dodgers wanted to bring back Kike Hernández? Has to do with his fit for this clubhouse and his unique ability to be able to hit in October. The defining success of this Los Angeles Dodgers team is going to be determined by what happens in the postseason. It always will be when you have this much talent on this team. It does not matter how many regular season games you win. Although it would be awesome to break records and win a lot of regular season games, that is not where this team's success is going to be determined. It's going to be determined by if they finish with a victory in October or if they are eliminated in October. That ultimately is the expectations for this team, and Kike Hernández has had a unique ability to be able to perform during those postseason moments. It is inexplainable statistically. Typically, there's a theory statistical wise that postseason stats and stuff really don't matter a whole lot, meaning that you're just taking a little bit of a smaller sample and you would rather look at the overall bigger picture of the regular season to look at. And for most players, I typically lie a little bit more towards that, meaning if I'm evaluating a player of who I want to be on a team in October, typically I'm going to look to see who the best players are given the largest sample size. I'm going to look towards the regular season stats to see how they do. That's how I think for most players. There is one real obvious objection or one outlier, and that's the case, and that's a Kike Hernández. I can't explain it, how good he has been for the Dodgers in October. He just has something a little bit different to him. During the course of his entire postseason run, I believe he's had a 130-something WRC plus in October baseball. And he seems to continue to go out there and deliver in big clutch moments. We remember Game 5 of the National League Division Series against the San Diego Padres when Kike Hernández went out there and delivered a big-time home run when this team needed it. In so many other really crucial moments, Kike Hernández went out there and delivered. It is exciting because this is a player that has meshed in well with this organization and he is a Los Angeles Dodger. When you think of Kike Hernández, you don't think of his time in Boston, you think of his time in LA and what he has meant. And he meshes incredibly well with all of the teammates and helps build a really good clubhouse. The Dodgers have a lot of those guys. You could argue that Kike Hernández, a little bit redundant in that, but there's something unique about having Kiké in there and his leadership ability. If you hear from different people, if you hear from Andrew Friedman, which shout out to Clint Pasillas, Lana Rizzo over at Dodgers Territory, if you're having an interview with Andrew Friedman, really good job right there. There just is something different, and there's been a lot of growth with Kike Hernández and his leadership ability and what he has uniquely meant to this Dodgers team. It is exciting. So just to let you guys know, this is not an official signing yet, or at least not as of the time that I was recording. It is, however, reported, and I believe Bob Nightingale reported, that it is going to be a 1-year deal. We do not know the contract value of the 1-year deal. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Short-term deal to bring back Kik Hernández. My expectation, and I think this is everybody's expectation, when Kik Hernández and that signing becomes official, is that in order to make a corresponding move to add him to the 40-man roster, somebody that was already anticipated to be injured throughout the course of the regular season or through large chunks of the regular season is likely going to be moved to the 60-day injured list. So that could be a Brusdar Graterol, who's likely to miss at least half of the season. That could be a Gavin Stone, or any one of these guys that we know has dealt with some type of injury. That, I think, is going to be the corresponding move, and that moves Kik Hernández onto this Dodgers team. He makes an impact, particularly in October, that the Dodgers, because I think we're all expecting them to automatically be in October, have that presence to be able to help him out. He is a guy that you can have on your bench, but also has the ability to go out there and get 300, 400 different plate appearances throughout the year. And then when you need him in October, if you have a spot that is open, you put Kik Hernández in there and you feel really good about what he's able to do. So I'm excited about that, particularly because I think it is a uniquely good fit for this Dodgers team. And I think this was a move that ultimately was inevitable for this Dodgers team, going out there and getting a guy like a Kik Hernández to bring back to this team. So that's my fallout. You guys all know who Kik Hernández is, and you guys have all watched his story, his development through the Dodgers over the past decade since he's been with the Dodgers, even though there was times when he was with Boston for a couple of years. You all remember his journey coming up, him coming back to the Dodgers, and just what he's meant for the Dodgers. Where does that leave this current roster at, and what is the fallout of bringing in Kik Hernández? This is something that Casey and I talk about repeatedly on this program, is there are consequences to each decision that you make. And those consequences are going to have some sort of ramifications to them. There might be small ramifications, they might be bit larger ramifications, but what exactly does this mean, not just for Kik Hernández, who now is going to be on this Dodgers roster, like I had mentioned, probably going to be filling in, might get some platoon at bats sometimes with Max Muncy, might fill in a little bit at second base, might get some time in center field, can move all around. That is a good part of having a guy with as much versatility as Kiké does. What does this mean for the rest of the roster, particularly offense-wise? When we're talking about adding in different players, unless you're talking about Shohei Ohtani, who is unique in which he is both offense and on the pitching side, we kind of split it up into those two categories. So we're going to look at the offense and where does this leave this offense right now. Currently, if we were projecting out what is going to happen for the start of the regular season, there is going to be a battle for one spot on this roster. Currently, these are the players that you have on your roster. You have two different catchers. Those are going to be locks unless people get injured, which, clarifying this is assuming that there is no injury. You have Will Smith, Austin Barnes. First base, you got Freddie Freeman. You have Mookie Betts at shortstop, Max Muncy at third base. You also have Miguel Rojas on the bench as a middle infielder. You also have Chris Taylor and Kik Hernández. In the outfield, you have Michael Conforto. You got Teoscar Hernandez. You have a Tommy Edman that can move out there as well, and you have Shohei Ohtani. So just going through those one more time: Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Teoscar, Muncy, Smith, Conforto, Edman, Barnes, Rojas, Taylor, Hernandez. I think, and it is my expectation, assuming that each one of those guys is healthy, that all 12 of those guys will be locks for this roster. and that includes a Chris Taylor. I've made arguments in previous shows, and you can actually go check out the hot take of where my thought process is of Chris Taylor. I believe that the Dodgers are going to keep him around, and I think there's an expectation that they intend to keep him as long as they possibly can, unless there is some sort of way dramatic fallout with Chris Taylor. It's Chris Taylor's job to lose at this point. It is what my mindset is, and it's for a couple of different reasons. One, if you look at his last 4 months of the season, he had a 110 WRC plus. That was technically better than Kik Hernández with glasses. If you want to be ultra specific, basically the exact same 1 WRC plus point difference. And also, I believe that the Dodgers I believe in the Dodgers and their want to go ahead and try to do everything possible to be able to get Chris Taylor to the 10 years of pension. And especially with Chris Taylor, who's likely going to get 250 plate appearances, it's not a whole lot. And to do that, to be able to help not just with CT3, who's meant a lot to the U.S. organization, but also to attract other free agents in the future, I think there is a lot of merit to that, especially if you look at the way the Dodgers have structured the contracts that they've given out to a lot of other players. 10 years actually is a repeated nature of what the Dodgers intend to do. And so that's my expectation, is they're going to keep Chris Taylor around. Although certainly with bringing in Kik Hernández, there is a little bit of redundancy there. So I could totally hear some of these other arguments. There are 12 guys that are currently on the roster that cannot, on the offense, that cannot be optioned down to the minor leagues, which means you have the 13th position player spot that is open, and I believe it's going to be an open competition through the course of spring training for either Andy Pages, for either Hae-Sung Kim, or James Outman. Hunter Fiducia is also on the 40-man roster. However, it is not my expectation that the Dodgers are going to carry 3 catchers, especially 3 catchers that don't have any positional versatility, meaning they can't play other positions besides maybe designated hitter or maybe first base, which designated hitter, first base, kind of filled up right now. So I believe it is between Pages, Kim, and Outman. So this leads to a very intriguing conundrum as far as what the Dodgers are going to do, and it is ultra important to be able to look and see what the Dodgers are going to do in this competition between the 3 of them, which I love competition. I love that these guys are going to go out there and try to fight for this one last roster spot. It's incredibly important. I think it's ultra important that they go out there and do everything that they can to be able to fight for their position. So then it comes to a question of, what is this spot that they are going to be fighting for, and what is the actual role that they're going to be fighting for? Meaning, for this last roster spot, for the 13th position player spot on this roster, is this fight for a starting job? Is it a fight for a platoon job? Or is it a fight for a, we'll play you whenever some guys need a rest, and that might be a once a week type of job? Whatever the answer to that is, I think determines the way that I would if I were the Los Angeles Dodgers, which I am not in control of the Los Angeles Dodgers. A lot of you probably are thankful for that. It would determine what I would do with these guys to maximize the talent and maximize the potential that each one of these guys has. So I think that is my first question as far as potential role, whether that be full-time starter, platoon guy, or sit on the bench type of guy. Because if you want to go out there and make this an open competition and say the best player is going to go out there and be on this team, well, if you're going to sit him on the bench, you're not going to get anything out of the best player, and that could potentially be harmful to them as well. So I think that is a really intriguing question, and leads me to my next point. And this is actually something that I've talked a lot about throughout the course of the offseason. Is it in the Dodgers' best interest to potentially look to trade Andy Pages? Now, I will explain this in just a second. And before I go through and explore this idea, let me throw a couple of clarifying, because I know this is something that not a lot of people are expecting or not a lot of people are wanting to do because they see the potential that Andy Pages has. One, if Andy Pages goes out there and his role is starting center fielder, you should not trade Andy Pages. Absolutely not trade Andy Pages. The Dodgers have a couple of openings on this roster, particularly up the middle. We're anticipating Mookie Betts to be the starting shortstop, although if things do not go well in spring training, he could be the second base position in which shortstop is opened up. Tommy Edman is going to need to fill in that role if that is the case. So it's shortstop, second base, a little bit of a question, and then it's center field that is particularly of question. If Andy Pages' role is starting center fielder, meaning that he's going to go out there and he's going to start and get 400 plus plate appearances, similar to what he did last year, then you do not trade Andy Pages at all. He would play an essential, important part onto this team, and that's the case. So that just throws out a lot of my argument if he is considered and goes out there and wins a spot and is a starter. However, I'm going to make the argument that it might be in the best interest for the Dodgers to potentially look, not right now necessarily, because you want to make sure guys are healthy, but if we get towards the end of spring training and it's looking like either Andy Pages is not going to win the job, whether James Outman breaks out or whether Ha-Seong Kim is actually looking really good, yes, Andy Pages does have minor league options, or rather, he has a minor league option, and this is going to be key to my argument as far as Andy Pages, as far as what he's going to do. If it's not a starter, a couple of things either happen. Either James Outman or Ha-Seong Kim are going to be called up as part of this roster, and they could win the job, in which case Andy Pages is going to be sent down to the minor leagues. Or you could make the argument that it's either a platoon situation with Andy Pages hitting against left-handed pitching, or gonna sit on the bench whenever Michael Conforto needs rest. Teoscar Hernandez maybe goes in and fills in for their role, maybe plays 2 days out of the week, maybe 3 if he gets lucky. Those 2 roles I do not like necessarily for an Andy Pages, and let me explain why. First off, let's get through this the platoon aspect first. Andy Pages last year, his overall numbers were about totaled out through the course of the regular season to about a league average hitter. He was about a 100 WRC plus hitter during the course of the regular season. Versus left-handed pitching, this is going to be the argument that a lot of people use for Andy Pages. He was significantly better against left-handed pitching. He had a 157 WRC plus against left-handed pitching versus right-handed pitching. I believe he had an 82 WRC plus. Now, a couple of clarifyings and a couple of key notes to be able to keep that into context. One, it was Andy Pages' first season in the major leagues and his first season back from missing most of the 2023 regular season at the minor league level with an injury. I believe it was some type of shoulder injury, if I'm not mistaken. First time being able to come back from that and be able to be healthy. That was the numbers that he was able to produce. He was also, I believe, 23 years old when that happened, which, if you have a league average hitter, especially one that's as dominant against left-handed pitching as Andy Pages was, and has an 82 WRC plus against right-handed pitching, which I know a lot of people are disappointed with, for a rookie type of hitter, especially one that has just come back from surgery, that's not the worst possible result. In fact, that's not actually too terrible for an Andy Pages, especially if you're projecting a lot of growth for him. Andy Pages did not do too terribly bad last year. Here is the issue with platooning Pages. Left-handed pitching. When you have platoon at-bats, there is a difference between a left-handed platoon hitter and a right-handed platoon hitter, particularly when it comes to opportunities against specific type of pitchers. Last year, and this is going to give you a little bit of context as far as the number of at-bats that he potentially could have, and let me go ahead and pull it up. As far as Andy Pages last year versus particularly types of pitchers versus lefty versus righty. Last year, Andy Pages hit .357 against lefties, .213 against righties. Versus righties, that was in 336 plate appearances. Versus lefties, that was only in 107 plate appearances. Which means that if you're dividing it up and you're looking at the numbers, it is a vast majority, 3/4 of plate appearances are going to be against right-handed pitching versus only a quarter is going to be versus left-handed pitching. That is a vast imbalance between the platoon spots that you're going to have in that lineup, which means if you have a platoon split of a lefty versus right-handed pitching and a righty versus left-handed pitching, the lefty going against right-handed pitching is going to get a vast majority of plate appearances versus the righty versus left-handed pitching. To provide another example, I believe Teoscar Hernandez, and I picked him because he was in the middle of the lineup. Andy Pages would not hit in the middle of the lineup. He would likely be a 7, 8, 9 hitter, but just give you a little bit of context. Teoscar Hernandez, I believe, had about a little bit under 200 plate appearances against left-handed pitching. I don't remember the exact number, 180 something, and he played basically the entire regular season. Which means the best case scenario to go out and get an Andy Pages, if you want to put him exclusively against left-handed pitching, let's say that he goes out there and does that, would be a bench bat, be able to utilize him off bench as a weapon versus left-handed pitching, but probably you're talking about maybe 200 different plate appearances at the most against left-handed pitching. In all reality, it's likely going to be last year when he had 400 plate appearances, he had barely over 100 plate appearances versus lefties. Probably be closer to 150 plate appearances against left-handed pitching for an Andy Pages. That is one of my problems with Andy Pages, specifically as a platoon bat. If you wanted to use him as a weapon against left-handed pitching, is the number of opportunities that he would see from that is vastly different from the guy. Let's just use it, and I've used this guy as an example, not on the Dodgers, but a guy like a Kerry Carpenter for Detroit was used as a lefty platoon versus right-handed pitching. He saw significantly more opportunities against right-handed pitching, particularly because there's a lot more right-handed pitchers in the game of baseball than there are left-handers. That is one of my issues with strictly going out there and platooning an Andy Pages, which could be an option that the Dodgers decide to utilize if they want to have Andy Pages on this team, and it would be my expectation is they would go out and do this. What is going to be the opportunities for having Andy Pages out there specifically just as a platoon bat would be my pushback, would be part of my critique right there. So then it goes to the other option. If you have him on your team, he's not the starting center fielder. He's either a platoon option or he's a bench option, which could be in part platoon. You could utilize him late in games versus left-handed pitching. Although, who are you going to substitute Andy Pages for on this lineup in order to put Andy Pages specifically in there over them? There's not a whole lot of answers. I'm not expecting, or it could be a Michael Conforto. It's not my expectation. If we look at the left-handed bats on this roster, it's Shohei Ohtani. You're not putting Andy Pages over at Shohei Ohtani. Not doing that for Freddie Freeman as well. Max Muncy could be, maybe, but then you have some other guys that you could utilize him as well, and you would have to do an additional substitution. Max Muncy's a possibility. Michael Conforto, maybe, and then maybe Tommy Edman, although he's a switch hitter, so he gets just switched around to the other side. There's just not a whole lot of pinch hit opportunities for these guys to be able to go out and do that. And you look at the bench right now, the projected bench is Austin Barnes, Miguel Rojas, Chris Taylor, and Kik Hernández, all of them being right-handed hitters. I just don't know how many opportunities there's going to be able to pinch hit for Andy Pages. So then it starts with okay, how are you going to go out there and be able to utilize him as an effective part of this roster? And the reason why this is so incredibly critical, the reason why this is so incredibly important is specifically because Andy Pages only has one minor league option left. This is something that we brought up before talking about these guys, particularly about both him and James Outman. The number of minor league options matter to your organization, especially on the position player side. So, the Dodgers have the option. If Hae-Sung Kim or James Outman wins a spot on this roster, they call him up. They could send Andy Pages down to the minor leagues, or throughout the course of the regular season, they want to bring up somebody fresh, call up one of those guys. Then it becomes send Andy Pages down to the minor leagues. What is the consequence of that? Consequence of that is his minor league options go from 1 down to 0. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the value or what some other organizations look at as far as value of players and some of the character traits that they look for. Within Andy Pages, he is incredibly valuable specifically because he is a cost-controlling position player with significant upside. He was a highly respected prospect coming up through the ranks and showed a lot of really good signs for the Dodgers coming up through the ranks. In fact, if you look across the organizations, there is a lot of organizations, or at least it would be my argument in a half dozen to maybe even a dozen other organizations, that Andy Pages would not just be on the 26-man roster right now. I think he would be that in a lot more teams, but very well could be a starting outfielder for a lot of other teams. And there is a lot of value with not just having a player who could be the starting outfielder, but a player that also has potentially 5 more years of control, who also has a minor league option, which provides a little bit of flexibility in case things go wrong. And here's part of my argument with this, with Andy Pages. Just some of my projections is how I see him. I picture him as being a corner outfielder. I think that's where he projects best. I think he has the ability to be able to play center field, and I think he can perform a little bit better than what we saw through the course of the 2024 regular season. And I think that is the Dodgers' hope, is that he's going to have the ability to play some center field, although I think he projects a little bit better in the corner outfield. I also think that he has the ability to right now be a starting caliber outfielder for a lot of different big league clubs, and I think if given that runway, he can grow into being a good, solid, powerful hitter at the major league level. So, will he get that opportunity to be able to do so with the Dodgers? And what is the exact future for Andy Pages? Let's say that it is this year, they use him as depth and as needed, which there will be at bats, there will be injuries. Yes, that happened to the position player side. They might call him up, they might send him back down, depending on what's needed. Let's say that the last minor league option is used this year. Let's fast forward a year from now to the 2025-2026 offseason. Let's say things go well. Let's say the Dodgers win the World Series. That's a good world to be able to think of, and then you're super happy with this. Then they have to make a decision as far as what Andy Pages is going to do, because then you have a position player that would have 4 additional more years of club control, really valuable to a club, but 0 flexibility. It'd be like having a guy who is signed to a 4-year contract that you don't have any ability to be able to move up and down on this roster. He would not be able to be moved down to the minor leagues. Otherwise, he would have to be designated for assignment and essentially be traded at that aspect. If the Dodgers want to go out and get a player like a Kyle Tucker, let's just say next offseason, which could very well be a possibility for this organization. Kyle Tucker is incredibly talented corner outfielder. It could be a role that the Dodgers decide to go down. Or if they have some other target for the outfield that they want to go down, that could once again block Andy Page's role on this team, yet they would be forced, if they want to have him on the Los Angeles Dodgers in 2026, to carry him not in the organization, not on the 40-man roster, but on the active 26-man roster, which, if things don't go necessarily well, you would have to risk and be okay with giving up on Andy Pages forever and not continuing with his development, which, if you do not give Andy Pages proper runtime during the 2025 season, you're taking a very serious chance, and you're not looking at a huge sample size and saying this guy's not going to make it to the major league level, and providing a wide open opportunity for basically nothing for other teams to be able to get in Andy Pages, because the value of having a player with 5 years and 1 minor league option is significantly different than a player with 4 years of control and 0 minor league options with very limited big league experience. There is a big difference in value of what you would get out of a player now versus later. So let me repeat myself with this as I said at the start of this. If Andy Pages goes out there in spring training and performs incredibly well, which this is not an argument to trade him right now. I want to see what happens through spring training. And if there is a need on this roster, let's say somebody gets injured, I want to make sure that there are players that are able to cover him. If Andy Pages also goes out there, let's say that everybody's healthy, but Andy Pages goes out there and performs really well and is going to get either starting role or significant playing time during the 2025 season, in which he's going to be on the big league roster for basically the entirety of the season, you do not trade in Andy Pages. If that's how the Dodgers picture it, all of this you don't worry about, and you keep him on your big league roster. But if he's going to be a platoon at bat, specifically against left-handed pitching, you're talking about maybe 150 plate appearances versus left-handed pitching. You're not talking about a whole lot of plate appearances. Last year, he only had 107 plate appearances against left-handed pitching. So it's just not a whole lot of opportunities with that side of the platoon. And if it's the bench bat that you're going to have on him, you either have to keep him on the major league roster to make sure he doesn't utilize his minor league option, or you have to be willing to go ahead and be okay with losing out on some of the value that he has. If you want to maximize on the value that a player like an Andy Pages, or you can even make a lot of arguments with the James Outman in this exact same vein, because he also has only 1 minor league option. If you want to take advantage of that, it is either have them on your roster and take advantage of the talent that he is, the talent that they have, or you have to trade him. Because if we get to a year from now and they utilize Andy Pages' minor league option, you're not going to get the same return like you did for a Michael Busch for an Andy Pages. I know Andy Pages, you might like him better than Michael Busch, but Michael Busch has 2 minor league options. He has additional flexibility and a little bit more control than what Andy Pages would have this time next year with no minor league options. So, it comes to a question. What is the exact role, and what is the role that each one of these guys is fighting for as the 13th position player? Like I've talked about in my argument with Chris Taylor, part of the reason why I think this is going to be the case is because I don't envision a large role for Chris Taylor. 250 plate appearances maybe at most for CT3 to go out and get to the mark where he needs that 10-year of pension. When you have a roster where you have guys that are, if they are healthy and they are out there, you're going to play them just about every single day. You look up and down this roster, how many off days are you projecting for a lot of guys with an Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Teoscar, Muncy, Smith, Conforto, Edman, and then you have one spot at the bottom right now projected for Ha-Seong Kim on Fangraphs, but could go to a Kik Hernández, could go to an Andy Pages, or whoever wins that last spot at the bottom of the order. There's not going to be a whole lot of opportunity, or I'm not anticipating a whole lot. So then it comes down to, is having an Andy Pages so essential to your bench and so essential to your depth that you need him through the course of the 2025 regular season? Could you fill in that with other guys? Could you fill that in? Yes, I know fans are not super high on a James Outman, but also one of the argument to have James Outman on this roster is particularly because the defense in the outfield is not looking that great, and you add Andy Pages being the center fielder, and if you don't trust Andy Pages' defense, you really don't trust the outfield defense at all with Conforto, Pages, and Teoscar. Conforto and Teoscar both being below average defenders in defense, and if you add another one in center field with Andy Pages, just not a great defense. If you're only talking about 200 plate appearances, why wouldn't you? There could be an argument that you could make it is you want the guy that's going to go out there and give you solid defense out in center field. An argument that you can make. What is the role that you're actually going to be looking for? Because if you want to maximize on the value of Andy Pages, now would be the time. You can wait now, being before the start of the regular season, because they have to make a decision relatively quickly, because they could still get a lot of value, whether they want to turn this into like a Michael Busch type of trade if they were to go down this route and target players that turn out to be really talented prospects, or whether they want to utilize him in some sort of package for some major league quality talent, maybe somebody that has a couple of years of experience that can go out there and fill in a center field, fill in a second base or shortstop type role that has a little bit more of a defined role that you seem to like. There still is an opportunity to be able to do so. But there is a clock that is ticking on this decision, which makes this spring training and what's going to happen in it so incredibly intriguing for the Dodgers. Yes, there's exciting conversation to be able to have on a whole wide range of things. Is Dave Roberts going to be extended, and how much money is going to make? My guess is he probably will be extended. Will he make a lot of money doing so? Probably. What number is that? I don't know. We'll find out what happens. There's also a lot of other storylines. When will Shohei Ohtani be ready to pitch? I don't know. The Dodgers have a lot of different pitchers that they can utilize until he is ready. This is one of those. This fight for the 13th spot, while it seems on the margins, I think is so incredibly important and speaks to how the Dodgers value each one of these guys and what exact role does it have on this particular Los Angeles Dodgers team. And what I don't want for these guys is for them to be called up, and this particularly goes for a lot of the guys that are coming up through this farm system, which you know, I am biased. Casey and I are biased with this because we actually get to see these guys' journey coming up. Absolutely, we're incredibly biased. But I don't think it does well for each one of these guys in their development, and for a lot of fans to say, hey, we don't develop position players, but then go and sit them on the bench for a significant period of time and then complain why they haven't produced when they haven't been given the opportunity to be able to produce. I don't want to see that happen for an Andy Pages during this upcoming season. And I think he's earned an opportunity to be able to do so, and I think a lot of organizations would value that if they did so. So I think it is a unique opportunity, and I don't want to see opportunities wasted for the Dodgers. A little bit of a hot take. I know a lot of you like Andy Pages and what he's been able to produce. I absolutely love what Andy Pages has been able to do at this point. In fact, if you go to the offseason show, Welcome to the Offseason, that started off right after the Dodgers won the World Series, it was my expectation and my hope that Andy Pages would be one of the starting corner outfielders for the Dodgers this season. That is not the decision that the Dodgers decided to make. They have Michael Conforto and Teoscar Hernandez starting in the corner outfield. So how do we go and how do we react from here? And how do we build the roster that's going to not only maximize the 2025 season, but continue to build on this dynasty? And I think this is a hard decision that the Dodgers are going to have to internally look depending on the situation. Again, there's a clear role, if there's a clear spot for Andy Pages to help the 2025 Dodgers team, then you don't trade him. But if there's not, or if it's a very, very limited role, then you look to see, okay, what is going to be in the best interest for this team, for this specific Dodgers team, and future Dodgers teams. And that becomes a very difficult question. And this sucks because I really like Andy Pages, and I think he would make a phenomenal Dodger if given the extended runtime. But you recognize the state. You're excited that Kiké is back, and you go from here and you try to do what is best, what is right for the organization, what is right for each one of these players. I got a lot I've been talking a lot. I've got about 15 more minutes that I can be out here and go live. So I got a couple of comments. We'll first get into, and I noticed Matt Kramer, thank you very much for the $9.99 super chat right now. We'll go ahead and read that, and then we'll go ahead and get through a lot of the other comments right now, which I'm sure a lot of disagreement or a lot of back and forth that we're going to be able to have in this. We'll try to run through that as quickly as possible. Matt Kramer, trading Pages might be competitive advantage, but I'm tired of following our homegrown players blocked by free agents. I fell in love with this team watching the young guys come up. It is just, and this is my personal opinion, I would rather there be a little bit more of a lot of the young position players that come up through the system have a spot in this role. And I don't say that just because I'm selfish and want these guys to go out and the guys that I've grown to like and gotten to know to have a spot on the Dodgers. In fact, I don't necessarily care if they're on the Dodgers or they're another organization. I'm going to be following them and rooting for them regardless. I think there is some value, and I've stated this repeatedly, in having young guys invest, or having an organization invest in at-bats, or invest in plate appearances, invest in playing time in younger players that have the potential to be part of your future of the organization. Typically, when guys come up, it is very difficult to be able to succeed immediately at the level, and especially with a city that demands excellence like Los Angeles does for each one of their players, and rightly so. You should demand excellence for each one of these guys. Sometimes patience to get these guys to the level that they need wears away. And I'm concerned about this for other players that are going to come up. If Dalton Rushing does not hit the ground running immediately, there's going to be calls for him being a bust, and there's going to be calls to, hey, we have Will Smith, we have corner outfielders, might as well not give you any playing time out there on the field. In which case, it has the potential to not be able to look good. I think having some patience with each one of these guys could bear some fruit, and it is something that I enjoy seeing coming up through the system. A lot of guys that the Dodgers develop, just different strategies, a different opinion that I have, be having an insight of watching each one of these guys. But I think there's something incredibly important with having guys come up through your system. I think that is an important aspect that I don't want the Dodgers to necessarily lose out of. Let's go ahead and go to a couple additional comments related to this topic right now. Well, Dorothy Gale, if Pages is moved to the minors and nobody else on the 26-man roster has options, there would be no way for Andy Pages to get back to the major leagues. That absolutely is right. If the Dodgers decided to go out, which I don't believe that they are, and sign another free agent to be a bench bat, there would be no way to bring up a Hae-Sung Kim, a James Outman, or an Andy Pages, or any one of these guys to the major league level, because there just isn't a spot for him. It's the exact same conversation that we've had from the pitching wise if you don't have guys with minor league options. Let's go to a couple of this right now. Christopher Navarro, I think he does have one minor league option left. If we use it, his trade value will decrease, exactly what we're talking about right here. Let's see. HP, I believe CT3 needs 150-ish games to get to his 10-year pension. That's too much just to be nice. Could be something. I don't know what the date is. I know he has 9.037 service years. I don't know what exactly that mark is. And that's going to be an interesting decision that the Dodgers are going to have to make. It determines, and I think this conversation with Chris Taylor depends on how much the Dodgers are relying on CT3. If he's not going out there and he's not producing, and the Dodgers are forced to rely on Chris Taylor, that is a different conversation than if it is he's a bench bat and we get to see CT3 once or twice a week and the Dodgers are going to win the division regardless. Those are different conversation as far as what we're going to be able to have. And as was mentioned, CT3 also has a little bit of positional versatility to there. Let's continue going on right now. Whatever comment username on here says, don't trade Pages, trade Outman. Got to keep rushing Freeland and anyone 19 or under. By the way, who you gonna trade for? Anyone? We're so deep. It is another thing where you could have a question of, we're incredibly deep as a player, but there are always guys that you can go and look to upgrade on the margins. If you were to trade a guy like an Andy Pages, you could look to, as they did with a Michael Busch trade, go ahead and trade for those type of prospects that aren't going to need to be added to the 40-man roster for a while, but have incredible value, incredible potential. And we've seen both of those guys turn into two of the top prospects within the system, that being Jackson Ferris and Zaire Hope. That would be an argument for going out and trading one of those guys for it, which I think there's more value right now in trading in Andy Pages than it would be for James Outman. Not to say that there's anything wrong with the James Outman, but we've seen James Outman, at least the most recent thing that we've seen is him struggling at the big league level, which did have a big bounce back at the AAA level. So totally get if you don't want to go ahead and trade in Andy Pages. The question would be, what role do you have for Andy Pages? And what do you want him to be part of this team? If it's sit on the bench, I don't necessarily know if that's a good plan. If it's send him down to the minor leagues, okay, what is the plan for him next season would be my question with Andy Pages. Let's see. Continuing on to a couple more of these. Mr. Seabad, Dodgers have serious first world problems. Exactly right. Need to sell the Porsche to make room in the garage for the Ferrari. Oh, the humanity. That's exactly right, Mr. Seabad. We're talking about very much some of these prospects. Hepatitis C latest, trading Pages for who, though? I'd try for a Matt McLain. That's a really intriguing one that I've actually mentioned in the past. If you go back to the time when, I think it was shortly before Gavin Lux got traded, I had talked about, and not when he was announced to Cincinnati, before that, that being a possibility, which Matt McLain and trading for Andy Pages wouldn't even be a remote possibility if he utilizes a minor league option. I'm not saying that Cincinnati is going to trade Matt McLain, but that could be somebody that you look for, has the ability to play shortstop. I know that, I believe it's Infinite Dodgers, I don't remember exactly the username, has been consistently talking about trading for the guy like a Lars Nootbaar from St. Louis. You'd have to give up more than an Andy Pages to get a player like that, but Pages could be a significant piece in some type of trade like that. There are major league guys that you could potentially go out and target, and there's a lot of teams that could utilize him, or you could utilize and try to get some minor league players as well. I don't know exactly who that would be. Philip Gomez says go out and get a young shortstop. Could be something that they decide to do right now. HP trading Pages only makes sense if we have younger prospects with more option years left. Getting Pages only platoon opportunities would definitely hinder his progress. That's part of the point that I'm trying to make, is if you only give him platoon at bats, especially just against left-handed pitching, it's not going to be necessarily a good thing for Andy Pages, because he's get 150 plate appearances against left-handed pitching, maybe another 100 throughout the course, and you're talking about 250 plate appearances, which actually right now on Fangraphs, the current projection is Hae-Sung Kim being projected onto the Major League roster, and with their 2025 projections, they currently have Andy Pages as getting 140 plate appearances. That is an entire waste of Andy Pages and his talent. Just my opinion, though, and I would rather see him traded than get 140 big league plate appearances unless there's some type of injury that happens. Let's see. Right now, trading Pages for prospects has to be really young prospects, nowhere close to Rule 5 draft. Down for trading Pages for a bunch of young international prospects, then cross our fingers and hope we find an Ellie De La Cruz in 4 years. Could be a possibility for trading him. Again, this is all spots if there is not a defined role for Andy Pages, and if he does not serve a unique purpose. If there's some sort of injury that takes place in spring training and they need him, then you don't trade him. And there is an argument to be made that they're going to need bats throughout the course of the regular season, and their depth on the position player-wise is not very full. Let's say that you go out and you have Hae-Sung Kim starting the year on the big league club. Let's say that you go out and trade an Andy Pages. Next player up would be a James Outman. And then the next player up, if they need an additional player, becomes a little bit more of a question mark. Could you bring in a guy that gets easily designated for assignment? Maybe a David Bodie. He's certainly somebody that the Dodgers have in there that they could call up, and like they did to Kevin Biggio, designate for assignment later. They could also, and this is an important part, an element, they could go out and call up a player potentially like a Dalton Rushing if they need a bat. If Alex Freeland is doing well, they have the ability potentially to go out and call him up, especially since he is going to be eligible for the Rule 5 draft after the season. How they would fill in center field remains a little bit of a question, although they do have guys on this roster that have the ability to play center field. They have Tommy Edman, who could potentially get a lot of time in center field. They do have a Kik Hernández, who played a lot of time in center field during the World Series. They have other guys that can go out there and fill center field. James Outman could be a defensive guy. You could go out there and get a guy easily designated for assignment or trade for somebody. There are a lot of different possibilities that the Dodgers could have. So then it becomes, how essential is Andy Pages part of this team versus the value that you could potentially get by trading him, is the trade-off that you would have to make for him. Let's see, Matt Kramer. It's starting to get annoying for me as far as what the Dodgers going out and not utilizing a lot of these guys that are part of the system. We could have White Sox lineup and win the West with this pitching staff. I don't know necessarily about that, but they certainly could, with the pitching staff, win a lot of different games. Hepatitis C later. Mariners need some offensive help. Talking about one of the prospects potentially traded for him. And with that, I trust the Dodgers scouting and front office to be able to make the right decision as far as if they were to make some sort of trading for potentially the right type of player. Let's see, Matt Kramer talking about CT3 and Barnes are probably gone. The team will be better if we don't give up on these guys. There certainly will be some openings coming up. Could be something. And CNEF, we've got Ryan Ward hitting bombs in AAA. Rushing also playing the outfield. Doesn't necessarily need Conforto. That was an interesting signing with Conforto. That actually started my analysis and what I was thinking as far as what the Dodgers' plans were in the outfield, because when they went out and got Michael Conforto, which there's a lot of reason to be excited. Don't get me wrong with Michael Conforto. A lot of people extremely excited about the talent that he has and believe there's a lot of room for upside. When you go out and get him, especially for signing him for $17 million, with him being a corner outfielder, he is going to get priority starts, and he's going to go out there and have probably 500 different plate appearances. He is going to be the starting left fielder for this Dodgers team, in which case, once that was apparent, and especially once they made the signing for Teoscar Hernandez, that really closed a lot of different opportunities, not just for Andy Pages, but for some of the younger guys, or even a player like a Dalton Rushing, if you wanted to get opportunities, because Dalton Rushing is not going to go out there and play center field. Just not going to happen for him, because he doesn't have the ability to. With Ryan Ward, for him, which I hope and I pray that he gets an opportunity this season coming up to be able to go out there and play on the big league field. It would have to be some type of injury to either Conforto or Teoscar Hernandez, or it would have to be off the bench. Certainly has a lot of talent, but he projects much more to be a corner outfielder rather than a center field type of option. So interesting to see what happens right there. We got one more minute that we'll go ahead and talk about this. Right now, Matt Kramer, truth is Pages has the most trade value, but I hate it. Outman needs to improve before he can be traded. I would agree, especially with the first half of it. I think there's still some value with James Outman, but I think Andy Pages definitely has the most value right now. Continuing on with one or two more comments right here. Hepatitis C later. Conforto's metrics are actually really good. Looking at his page. Seems like we got right player. Yeah, he certainly is there is a lot of good stuff to be able to do that. And then we'll get to right now. Matt Kramer, Austin, you excited to see Ronaldo Yin? You're absolutely right. I'm excited to see that. Super excited to be able to see baseball coming up, and I think that's going to do it for right now. I'm super excited for baseball coming up. Obviously, talked a little bit about it. There is no inside reports. There's no insider rumors that I have with this. I have a lot of connections with the organization, or I know a lot of people within the organization. I think that's a better phrase. Casey has significantly more connections than I do. But I think this is a good testing and feeling of what exactly the roster currently is as we go ahead and enter into the 2025 season for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Spring training has started because pitchers and catchers have reported. Kik Hernández is back, which, if you listen to the first half of the show, incredibly excited about, and I think it makes a lot of sense for this Dodgers team. And I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do. And I think all expectations is, given what he's done in the past, he's going to go ahead and do a lot of those similar things that he has done in the future. So, what does that mean for the last offensive position player spot? Particularly when it comes to Andy Pages, or you can extend this to a James Outman. Different conversation with Hae-Sung Kim because he has 3 minor league options. He is not part of this, nor will he be traded, nor should he be traded. But if you have, for Andy Pages and James Outman, you have 1 minor league option left. You have a running clock. What are you going to do with them? And if it's not a significant role, is it best to capitalize on their value now? Or are they such an essential part or so needed that you are going to have them on this big league club? Meaning they are going to play an essential role, either a part of this club, or their potential is so high that they could potentially be an October bat. I think those are very serious questions for this organization as we enter spring training. This is probably the thing I'm going to be looking for the most in spring training is what happens to each one of these guys. And what is the Dodgers' decision as an organization to be able to go out there and decide what do we do with them? Because I do not want talent wasted for this team. Part of the reason why I'm frustrated with a lot of guys that are incredibly talented stuck in Oklahoma City, because I don't want their careers wasted down there. Neither do I want the Dodgers to waste talent that they have and not get appropriate value either in production at the major league level or in trade pieces otherwise. They have a unique opportunity, but a opportunity that has a very limited clock to be able to do and make a decision. If I had to take a guess, I would say Andy Pages remains within this organization, likely starts the season, and then we'll see what happens from there. Cross our fingers, hope that he stays on the roster, hope that he does well, and we'll see what happens. But that also means that you're hoping for an injury to see what a Hae-Sung Kim or a James Outman or a Dalton Rushing or an Alex Freeland have the ability to be able to do. Is that best for the organization? I think it'll be determined with healthy competition in spring training. How does Andy Pages look in center field? And do you trust him with the keys to be able to run center field? If not, is 200 plate appearances or 150 plate appearances versus left-handed pitching worth keeping him on the roster? Or is that is it a more valuable potential look to see what you could get to maximize on the incredible talent that is Andy Pages? Because believe me, Andy Pages has an incredibly bright future, but it's only going to be a bright future if he gets the opportunity to be able to succeed. And that's what I want to see from him. And I want to see the Dodgers be able to have the best roster on the field to be able to go out there and win a World Series in 2025. That's going to do it for the show today. Ran a couple minutes past 6:15 or on the East Coast, 3:15 on the Pacific. So grateful for you guys to be able to tune in here. Dodgers Dogs, part of the Dodgers Daily Network. We will be back Wednesday night. Casey and I believe, will be going live. Should be going live, I believe, 5:30 Pacific. It's typically when we go live on Wednesdays. Could alter somewhere around then is when we typically are going to go live. Until next time, though, thank you for tuning in, and go Dodgers.